She had a set of wise guy replies written for her to aim at individual Democratic members of committees when they asked questions. But when she tried that with our first guest tonight, he literally left her speechless.
Tonight, loyalty was apparently not enough to save Pam Bondi's job.
We are so proud to work at the directive of Donald Trump.
According to sources, the president vented his frustration to allies, then a heated confrontation with Bondi last week. That led to today's shakeup. He fired the attorney general, posting, "We love Pam."
Any victim has been through, especially as a result of that monster.
Are you able to track who it was that obscured Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator in an FBI document?
I believe Wexner's name was listed more than 4,000 times.
Yeah, I already told you that. This is where he's listed as a co-conspirator.
Can I finish my answer? Come on, let me finish my answer. We corrected that within 40 minutes.
And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice.
For months, Pam Bondi was one of Donald Trump's most aggressive defenders inside the Justice Department. But in one Senate hearing, a single exchange cut through the noise. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse asked whether the FBI had found alleged photographs connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. Bondi didn't answer directly. Instead, she attacked the senator. That moment became bigger than one clash. It became a symbol of what critics said defined Bondi's tenure: deflection, political combat, and a Justice Department increasingly accused of refusing straightforward oversight. Then came the twist. Trump fired her. And suddenly, Lawrence O'Donnell's question to Whitehouse, "Will you miss AG Pam Bondi?" sounded less like a joke and more like the summary of an entire political era.
Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that. Okay.
That exchange worked on television because it exposed two competing stories in real time. Whitehouse was trying to force a factual answer. Did the FBI find the material that had been publicly discussed by a witness? Bondi responded as if the question itself was the offense. And that is what made the moment so potent. It wasn't just the allegation, it was the refusal to engage it directly under oath in a Senate oversight hearing while running the Justice Department. In Washington, hearings are often theater. But the best political theater reveals something real. What this one revealed was a Justice Department leadership style built on counterattack. Whitehouse pressed for facts. Bondi reached for opposition research. And in that instant, the hearing stopped being about one question and started becoming a referendum on her credibility.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department
question.
of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
Mr. Whitehouse, excuse me, Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to talk to the FBI.
The report to you, can't you answer this question?
Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to discuss this with Director Patel.
Did Homan keep the $50,000?
As Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr.
Never mind.
Homan
I can
was
see I'm not going to get a straight
full
answer from you to a very simple
by
question.
the FBI agents and the DOJ.
Do
They
you know-
found no credible evidence of wrongdoing. You know, you're very concerned about money and people taking money, and you rail against
wait a
dark
second,
money.
wait a second, wait a
Yet
second.
you work with dark
Wait a
money
second.
groups all the time, Senator
Wait a
Whitehouse.
second. Did you know whether or not in that investigation they looked at whether the $50,000 payment to Mr. Homan was declared by him on his tax returns?
Senator, I would be more concerned if I were you when you talk about corruption and money that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here. I'd like, Mr. Chairman, you generally like to have us be able to get answers to know, and we'll follow up with the QFR. And to the extent Patel wants to answer, that would be great as well. What happened to the $50,000? Did Homan keep it? Did the FBI get it back? If he kept it, did he put it on his tax returns? Pretty simple questions. Homan was the same guy who said there was a deal with Eric Adams. He said, if Adams doesn't come through, I'll be back. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to? Which brings us to the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee, because he was also involved in that transaction. Yeah. What became of the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee?
Yeah, Senator Whitehouse, to correct you for one moment, that would be the Honorable Judge Emil J. Bovee III to you.
Not at the time of this. He was an employee of the Department of Justice. And what became of the OPR investigation?
It's all pending litigation,
misconduct?
Senator. I can't discuss pending litigation nor personnel matters.
OPR customarily publicly says when there's an investigation, and at the end of it, they provide a summary. Why can't you say whether there's an OPR investigation and whether, if it's concluded, there's a summary?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
Even public ones?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
So, Kash Patel told this committee that his grand jury testimony after immunization, after initially pleading the Fifth, was, and I quote, sealed by the Department of Justice. How and when and why was his testimony sealed, and by whom?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss any testimony, especially testimony that could be sealed with you.
No, the question is, was it or was it not sealed?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Well, he also said that he worked with the Department of Justice to have his transcript released publicly. How and when was his transcript released? Presumably, if he released it publicly, that's something you can discuss because it's public.
Well, Senator, I believe you discussed that with Director Patel.
And I'm asking you because he said the Department of Justice made this decision and you run the Department of Justice.
I would refer that to Director Patel.
Even though you run the Department of Justice and he testified that the Department of Justice released his transcript publicly.
If it is released publicly, we will get you a copy, Senator, gladly.
If, being a rather important word there, when your FBI director testified that that was a fact. Treasury compiles suspicious activity reports, referred to often as SARs, that DOJ receives automatically. Hundreds related to accounts of Jeffrey Epstein. How many of those Treasury SARs did you or Director Patel investigate?
Senator, I'm not sure if you're concerned because you took money, I believe, did you, from Reid Hoffman, one of Epstein's closest confidants, not only once but twice in 2018 and 2024, if that's correct. But, Senator, did you ask Merrick Garland any of this over the last 4 years when he sat before you? This investigation has been going on. This investigation was closed. Did you ask Alex Acosta that?
And Patel came to office, you said you would look into this. There were hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Some people would deduce from the fact that they are called suspicious activity reports that there might be suspicious activity. And yet you seem to have looked at 0 of those suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein accounts. Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that? Okay. Here's what we cut to something else. The Marshal Service is supposed to protect our federal judges. I have asked repeatedly for the Marshal Service to let me know if they are investigating or being inhibited from investigating whether or not there is orchestration of threats against federal judges, whether under either conspiracy laws or racketeering enterprise laws or aiding and abetting laws, whatever. But as you know, there's the person who says the threat, and then there may very well be somebody orchestrating the threat behind them. Mm-hmm. Is the Marshal Service allowed to investigate orchestration of threats, and do you know if they've taken one step to do so?
May I answer the question, Chairman Grassley? The time has expired.
I think it's the convention of the committee that if I've started my question in my time, you may answer the question.
I was asking the chairman.
Okay, before I go to Cornyn.
She wants to answer the question, Chairman.
Oh, please go ahead. I thought you said you didn't want to answer it.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Sir. Thank you. Senator Whitehouse, I would be happy to sit down with you regarding any threat to any federal judge in this country. We take threats very seriously. I will set a meeting with you, with Director Serralta of the U.S. Marshals, and I will be there. And we will talk about any threats on federal judges,
including orchestration,
who threatened them or who orchestrated them.
Bingo. Thank you.
And that broader pattern matters. Because Whitehouse wasn't only asking about Epstein. He was painting a larger picture. A Justice Department that, in his view, no longer treated oversight as oversight. He pushed Bondi on suspicious activity reports on Tom Homan, on Kash Patel, on threats against federal judges. His case was simple. If Congress asks the Attorney General direct questions, the Attorney General should answer them. Instead, the hearing became a barrage of insults, deflections, and ideological talking points. That is why Bondi's critics seized on the moment so quickly. They argued this wasn't a bad performance, it was the performance. The hearing showed, in concentrated form, exactly how Trump's DOJ handled accountability. Not by disproving critics point by point, but by politically overwhelming the room.
You sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe. I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman.
Okay, I will correct you. This guy you talk about has never given me a dime. You are making that up. And just by the way, how weird it is that an attorney general coming to the Judiciary Committee for an oversight hearing prepares Oppo research on the senators, plus false Oppo research, plus is so sloppy that she says it, even though it's false. I mean, really, this MAGA DOJ stuff is getting out of hand.
Who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
When will it be that the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're
personal,
a failed lawyer
refuse to
because you don't
accept,
understand when someone...
By the time Whitehouse sat down with Lawrence O'Donnell, Bondi was no longer just a controversial witness. She was a fired attorney general. And now the story widened. Was she removed because of one ugly hearing? No. But the hearing fit the larger collapse around her. Reuters reported that Trump had grown frustrated with Bondi's performance, especially over the handling of the Epstein files, and also felt she had not moved aggressively enough against people he wanted prosecuted. NBC and BBC both reported that her management of the Epstein file controversy had become a political liability. So what the hearing captured was not the whole fall. It captured the mood of the fall, combative, chaotic, defensive, and increasingly unsustainable.
I will fight every day.
President Donald Trump on Thursday removed Pam Bondi from her post as U.S. Attorney General. The move follows mounting frustration with her performance, including her handling of files related to Jeffrey Epstein, which drew renewed scrutiny of Trump's past friendship with the late financier and sex offender.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
During a combative hearing before a House of Representatives panel earlier this year, Bondi responded to criticism with political attacks directed at lawmakers. She also refused to apologize or look at Epstein victims and their relatives who attended the proceedings.
So he asked a 4-minute question.
Restore 45 seconds to Mr. Nadler, please, Mr. Chairman.
Answer.
Trump had also reportedly grown frustrated that Bondi was not moving quickly enough to prosecute his critics and adversaries.
These were corrupt, radical left Democrats, because Comey essentially was he's worse than a Democrat.
The targets included former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James, neither of whom faced criminal charges after investigations, with both cases ultimately dismissed. Bondi's ouster could lead to a shakeup in strategy at the Justice Department, and potentially a renewed push to deploy the U.S. legal system against Trump's enemies. In the interim, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, Trump's former personal lawyer, will lead the Justice Department.
Good morning.
What makes this story bigger than one firing is what comes next. Whitehouse told Lawrence that if Democrats regain Senate control, Trump's Justice Department will finally have to start answering questions. That is the real subtext here. Bondi's exit did not end the controversy. It may have intensified it. Because now the questions that followed her are moving on to the next Attorney General. Who knew what? What did the FBI find? What happened to the Tom Homan investigation? Why were lawmakers getting deflection instead of answers? And if Bondi's downfall came partly from failing to control the Epstein files story, her replacement inherits a Justice Department where those files are no longer a fringe obsession. They are a governing crisis. Pam Bondi's defenders can argue she was a loyal soldier in a brutal political environment. Her critics can argue she turned the Attorney General's office into a shield for power. But whatever side viewers take, one fact is hard to ignore. One of the defining images of her tenure is no longer a policy rollout or a courtroom win. It is a Senate hearing, A senator asked a direct question. The Attorney General counterpunched instead of answering, and months later, she was gone. That's why Lawrence O'Donnell's question landed so hard. Will you miss AG Pam Bondi? Not because it was witty, because by then, the answer said everything. This was not just the end of a cabinet official. It was the collapse of a style of governing that mistook aggression for accountability and discovered too late that the cameras were still rolling.